Welcome, and thank you again for choosing Glad to Have You as your mobile app developer. Our goal in each tutorial is to teach you how to harness the power of your custom mobile app. In this tutorial, we'll be covering the guest management page of your portal and how you can use this page to really get to know your guests and what types of things they're enjoying while staying with you. You'll also have an opportunity to use this video along with a short quiz to certify your reservations team with a Glad to Have You agent certification. To get to your guest management area, we'll go to your guest management page. A note to anyone that's been using the system for a while, this is a new page in your admin portal. Your guest management page is the new home to your Home tab, the Reservations and Invitations tab, and your Guestbook tab, all of which were previously housed under your Property Management page. This is also where you'll find your Notify Current Guests tab and your Scheduled Notifications tab, which were previously housed on their own page. For the purposes of this tutorial, we'll focus solely on the Reservations and Invitations tab. To learn more about guest notifications and the Guestbook, please see the tutorials on those subjects. Let's look at the Reservations and Invitations page, as this is where your reservations agents will do most of their work in Glad to Have You. One of the first things that stands out are the 3 quick search buttons on the top right side of the page. These buttons actually expand down to 5 buttons. We'll get back to these quick search buttons in a moment. There are several ways you can search for reservations. The default is to pull all reservations arriving in the next 7 days. Anytime you need, you can widen your search by changing the arrival dates and clicking on the search button. Now let's see what the quick search buttons do. When I click on the current guests and owners, it will give me a list of guests and owners that are currently in-house. Notice the button turns green during the search. To deselect this search, I'll simply click on it again or click the clear button. The button will turn back to blue, indicating you are no longer engaged in that search. The next quick search button will tell you how many reservations are flagged over the next 30 days. There are actually 2 types of flags. One is a system flag and looks like the caution symbol within the quick search button. This flag tells you that a reservation is missing an email address or has been bounced back due to an incorrect email address, or that a reservation is a duplicate, meaning that the guest has more than one reservation for the specified dates. These flags allow your reservations team to determine whether or not something needs to be done with this reservation in order to send an invitation to the guest. Once the error has been resolved, the agent can invite the guest by simply pressing the Invite button under the Actions. The other type of flag your team could come across is the team flag. For someone to set a flag to a reservation, they would go to More button in the Actions column, click on the flag, and then type the reason for the flag. Always ask your agents to put their initials after the reason for the flag. That way you'll know who put that flag in. So we'll flag this reservation. Then when your agents hover over it, it'll say why they're flagged. To remove the flag, just go back to More and Clear Flag. The next quick search button will indicate how many of your guests have been invited and are not using the system over the next 13 days. In this example, there are 182 invited guests that are not using the system. You know that a guest has been invited because of the calendar with the green check mark in front of it. If you hover over it, it also tells you what day they were invited on. If they were using the information in the app, there would be, let me clear this, there would be an apple for iPhone or iPad use, a robot, if we can find one, there we go, a robot for Android use, a computer screen if they're using the guest portal, or an Adobe icon if they've downloaded a printable PDF of their information. If they've been invited but are not using the information, feel free to send them another invitation by clicking on the Invite button in the Actions column of the reservation. If you click on the Show More button under this third button, 2 additional quick search buttons appear. These buttons can be used as you gather information about your guests. If you or your agents are collecting this type of data on your guests, and we'll look at this where this data can go in a moment, you can simply click on one of the buttons to see if any of your upcoming reservations or current guests are having birthdays or anniversaries. So we actually have 5. And we will clear that search. Now let's take a look at the various ways to filter your search. We'll go to the Set Filter button and see that there are 5 separate areas you can filter through. The first is the guest type. VIP guests appear as royalty on their reservation. If you choose to blacklist a problematic guest, you can mark them Do Not Rent To, and they'll appear with a red circle and a line through it where the guest would be. A regular reservations holder is just a little man here. A guest of a guest is important because these are people who have been invited by one of your invited guests, so you have the opportunity to garner their marketing information, name and email address, because one of your paying guests invited them to download their stay. An owner is simply a house, and a repeat guest appears with a little recycle wreath in front of him. The next filter section is how the guest is using the app. For the Apple products, there's an Apple icon. For Android products, there's the robot. For folks using the guest portal, there's a computer screen. And for those that have downloaded all of their information for print, there's an Adobe icon. The next 2 filter sections are intuitive and show whether or not a guest has been invited and whether a guest is paid in full or not. So paid in full is a green $sign, not paid is a red $sign. If your guest has been invited, there's a red or a green check mark in front of the calendar, and if they haven't been invited yet, there's a red question mark. Inside your system, you'll also be able to see when a guest was invited by hovering over that green check mark. The bottom filter section is filled with certain scenarios that may be helpful to search by. Only guests currently in town, only reservations without Access My Rental instructions, only reservations without door codes, if you're using an automatic door system like Kaba or Lock State or Resort Lock, only reservations associated to active properties, or only reservations that are flagged. The next thing you're able to do through your reservations and invitations section is to import past reservations so that your agents have a full scope of the guest's previous stays with you. This will only work if your property management system is able to export data for you. If you go to Import Guest Reservations up at the top tabs, then Download Excel Template, you'll get our import template. The template will require certain pieces of information such as reservations ID. Let me see if I can get to it. The template will require certain pieces of information such as reservations ID or folio number, guest first and last name, guest email, guest address, including the city, state, street, city, state, and zip, the guest ID if your property management system supports this, the property ID from previous stays, the book date, and the trip start and trip end dates. This is an example of how it will look. So it's going to look for the reservation ID or folio ID, however your property management system uses it, guest first and last, guest email address, guest street, city, state, and zip, guest phone number if it's available, the guest ID if your property management system supports it, the property ID of previous stays, the book date, trip start and trip end dates. Some of this other stuff does not matter. If it pulls over, great. If it doesn't, that's okay. And really, trip start and trip end will be the end of the necessary information to pull into the system. To view the details of a guest's past or future stays, click on the guest's name. We'll go back. And we'll look at Heather St. Well, let's look at Peter Amont. Yeah, we'll try Peter Amont. So if we click on the guest's name in the guest column, it opens up several areas that you can view and populate for this guest. The basic information, name, email address, hometown, guest type, and total stays will be populated for you. More stays will show up if you've imported your previous guest stays from your property management system. You can also view the details of their current reservation or past reservations by clicking Show next to the total stays, then View on whichever stay more about. When you click on View, it actually takes you to the tab under Basic Details. This is where your door code will appear, as well as the details of the reservation. Details. You'll also be able to change this guest to a VIP guest or mark them Do Not Rent, add their birthday, and their anniversary. If a guest has submitted a guestbook entry in the past, their guestbook photo will show up on their photo under Basic Details. Until they submit a guestbook entry, it will simply remain the silhouette. Under the Basic Details, if you click Show in the Attributes line, you'll see a tabbed history of this guest, past and present reservations. There's nothing in for this guest yet because we haven't imported past reservation information, but this will help you better understand what your guest stay habits are, so it will show you historic information. For instance, if your guest always stays in March, it will say, March 2012, March 2011, March 2010, Thursday through Sunday stays, so that you get an idea of what type of guest this is. So you could assume from this that this guest is a weekender who comes in March. That way, if you have specials or deals or things that you'd like to promote to this guest, because you know his habits, you're able to market to him that way. Under the Guest Notes tab, you'll see 5 fields that you can use for whatever notes will make sense to you and your staff. They're completely customizable, so feel free to use these fields for anything you like. To customize the notes labels, this will take just a minute. Simply out of here, go to your account page and click on Custom Guest Notes labels. You can then rename these whatever labels you'd like to use. We've used General Notes, Guest Preferences, Concierge Notes, Guest Services or Prior Issues, and Owner Notes. I've also seen Reservations Notes, Front Office Notes, those types of things. So you can name them whatever you'd like. At that point, you can then have your agents add whatever notes make sense to add when speaking with the guest. So we'll go back to that guest, Peter, and under guest notes, this is where they would add guest or notes about this guest or regarding this guest for whoever these labels go to. We'll tell you what this guest looks like during their stay. Understand this guest and what their preferences are. So you can see by this guest at beach bonfires and commons, Grand Boulevard. He was looking at a lot of shopping, Pier Park, a rainy day category, stand-up paddleboard rentals. That might be something for your concierge to know. Looked at the Wi-Fi he looked at everything really in the custom content, so that's great. That's how you want it to be used. Looked at some points of interest, homes for sale category, so that indicates to your real estate team that this might be a potential buyer. Also looked at different rental units and some restaurants. Finally, you'll be able to look back through any and all of your guests has submitted, which this guest likely hasn't submitted anything yet. But if he had, all of the guest book entries that he's entered thus far and for each property will be shown here. Please remember that this tutorial can be used and should be used with your reservations team. Once they've viewed the tutorial and taken a brief quiz, they can be a glad to have you certified agent. Once your team is ready, you can go to gthy.com, gladtohaveyou.com/agent certification and receive a copy of this quiz. All they need to add is their company name, their name, and their email address. The assignment is down here, what they need to look up for their quiz. And then there are several other questions. And they just submit it when they're done. Once they're graded, we'll send you certificates for those who have passed. This concludes the tutorial on on guest management page, reservations and invitations. Other tutorials are and will be available as well.